Hi there, my name is Alex and welcome to Animated Illustrations tutorial process. For this video, I'll be taking you through a two-step tutorial on how to make your illustrations come to life using Adobe After Effects. Now please keep in mind this is the first tutorial video I've ever created, so I apologize if you feel I skim over or pass through any particular pieces of this process too quickly. I'm very new to this and I mainly just want to give you a solid rundown on how animated illustrations works and the process by which we go through it. For this tutorial, we're going to be splitting the video down into two major categories. Category 1, creating your illustration and separating the layering framework. Part 2, implementing your illustration's movements using Adobe After Effects. For part 1, we need to explain how your illustration is going to work. The first step, of course, is designing your illustrations. I don't want to spoil the magic for you, but it's not as simple as the ads make it out, where you put an illustration in, pop up a effect, and boom, presto. It actually takes a bit more work to do that. The main key point, more than anything else, is going to be layering. Now for context, you can design whatever you want when you're entering After Effects illustration. It can range from a first-person point of view, a close-up of a character, an animate object, or even an environmental design. For a bit of reassurance, the design I'm going for is very simple, though you can see a solid framework of how this process is going to go. Like I said for part 1, the biggest takeaway is separating your image into multiple layers. Now there are two important parts of this you need to understand. The first is that the more volume and detail you add to your illustration, for whatever movements you may want to design or create, the more layers you will have to separate. Now for my design, obviously I don't have a lot of pieces. I have the arms, the limbs, the torso, and the head. But if you go into more complex designs, you're going to see things you need to move, such as strands, eyelashes, eye pupils, mouth, nose, eyelids, clothing, hair, head, facial movement, and so on and so forth. Again, this is all part of the process, but it just gets more complex the further detailed you want your illustration to go. Now my second takeaway from this is adding on to the layering effect, which is simply adding depth to each layer. The reality is you simply can't copy paste each part. I mean, you can, but it's going to look really, really janky and wrong, and it's going to destroy the illusion of animation very quickly for your viewer. For this in particular, I recommend creating lining or dark shadowing to each part that you create, and making sure each one blends in smoothly with the design of your character or animation as a whole. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means. Simply adding little extensions to the areas less visible in the illustration helps create the illusion of movement and fluidity to whatever you're drafting much better. My recommendation is simply adding these during your project ahead of moving to After Effects so you don't lose track or focus. Trust me, I did that. You don't want to be stuck on an arm for a whole day or longer in After Effects when you're supposed to be pinning, because that sucks. To get a better understanding of this, I recommend watching tppo's hair and character animated illustration process on YouTube. He breaks down everything from drafting your character design, how layering works when making more complex forms of animated illustration, and how the process blends in from Photoshop design into After Effects. The link for his video will be in the description too. Once you've gone through all this and you've pretty much ensured that each layer blends in smoothly, the next step is obviously making sure your project is saved and then exporting. Now, very importantly, you want to make sure that you can export this file as a Adobe Photoshop or a PSD. Most applications for illustration nowadays, like Clip Studio Paint, Procreate, or Ibris Paint, allow users to export files. This helps mostly just to ensure the smooth transition from Photoshop to After Effects. That way files don't get messy and not corrupted or anything that may dampen the illustration process as a whole. Okay, so now that you've mastered the art of layering your illustration and made it so that everything is nice and smooth, and of course saved, please be sure to save it. It would really suck if you didn't save it up to now. The next step is of course bringing your PSD file into After Effects. Now, similar to most assignments, you simply open a new project and drop your PSD file into composition. A keynote during this is you will receive a message on the illustration with After Effects asking what type of import you're trying to create and what you want to do with these layers. Be sure to leave your file as composition and simply click Merge Layer Styles into Footage. Then simply follow the steps of moving your file into the timeline at the bottom. If everything transitions out smoothly, most of your layers will simply end up properly in the timeline. My recommendation is, before going any further, simply looking over and making sure each layer is assigned in the correct order. That way nothing looks janky or wonky or out of place or out of design. It may take you a few minutes to do this, but trust me, it'll definitely help in the long run. Now for this section in particular, your biggest friend here is going to be the Puppet Position tool, otherwise Control P. Now there are other variants if you scroll through or hold click over the icon for a while, but Puppet Pin is going to be our main tool here. With this, we're going to be able to create anchor points and positions across each limb and the torso. We'll do this with each piece to create a sort of breathing animation and simple transitional movement. Using Puppet Pen position, we're able to transition the movement of the front arm across the body. To do this, like I said, we'll use 3 points. Top at the shoulder, middle at the joint, and bottom near the wrist. Now for the top pin, we'll leave it as it is, because unless we need to create movement at the shoulder, it stays the same. Now, just for reassurance, don't worry too much about if you move the other ones. The top pin acts as an anchor point for the limb. So unless you move it or shift that one specifically, you don't have to worry about the limb moving wherever you use the anchor points. I should also point out that these joints allow you to do some really unique things. It's very weird. When you move the anchor points, you can get some very weird bending processes and movements, but don't let it distract you. Again, you're just trying to make a smooth transition. Now, similar to opacity, we're going to be creating several time stop points across the time frame, each one helping create that smooth transition I was mentioning. Luckily, Puppet Pen doesn't just leave us in the dark. Upon moving each pin to a different position and locking in a time stop point, you can see a small track of line where how the original point has moved for the next one. Now using this, we can simply track the movement of our limbs and create a smooth transition from one side to another. Now you're not going to get this right the first time. Just take your time with this and don't rush into it. Another very important step to note is that Puppet Pen tool, if you hold over the layer long enough, will actually show you an outline of where the limb was originally. That way you have a good idea as to where it's going to move, and again help create that smooth transition. This will take some time, so don't rush it. You don't have to make anything fast or anything. Take your time with this. And as you can see, we move from one side to the other. And simply mess around with it. That's the biggest thing you can really do during this. Simply see what works, what doesn't, if it feels too far out, too far stretched, so on and so forth, until you feel everything has positioned smoothly over. Okay, so now that you've familiarized yourself a bit with the Puppet Pen tool, you can slowly begin to break down each other layer and how you're going to have transitions work. Now for my process, I wanted to simply create an arm movement with the upper arms moving back and the legs sliding. I also wanted to add a sort of breathing effect, so I'll add 3 extra points to the torso too. That way it gives a sort of deep inhale and deep exhale to the character, just to help with the fluidity and to bring a bit more life to the animation as a whole. Mind you, you don't have to do this by any means. It's, again, like I said, just messing around, seeing what's going to work, what's not going to work, and simply Control Zing and then going back and forth with it. Now, a very big prominent thing I need to remind you of is to please use Control S, like a lot. Even if it's simply just one thing you do, use Control S or autosave. There are many points in this where you may feel sluggish or tired, and it would really suck if you click Control W or X, or you hit something and all of that work goes down. So be sure that while you're working, just use Control S when you feel something is very solid or right. Like I said, even if it's just one thing, just be careful on this side, especially nowadays if stuff breaks down or goes out of power or anything. Okay, so once you've gone through the process of adding pins all across your illustration and framework, it's finally time that you get to see your design. If you follow the steps that I've laid out thus far, you should get a design very similar to what I have right now at the beginning and here at the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. Like I said, I'll leave my recommended video for character animated and illustrations by tppo in the description below, and I hope you take care. Thanks.